Welcome to the Commercial General Liability chapter, also known as CGL. This is a rather important chapter of your learning. CGL is what protects a business from any lawsuits. It could be a lawsuit that arises on premises, such as a slip and fall, or it could be a lawsuit from, say, a product that fails and injures a customer. Or it could be a personal injury lawsuit where somebody sues you because you had them falsely arrested, or if you defamed them, or if you had them wrongfully evicted. CGL is part of every business owner's policy. It's also an important part to a commercial package policy, a CPP. You can write this monoline or with a package. Monoline means standalone. Every business that has insurance almost certainly has a commercial general liability portion of its policy. Think of a contractor, for example. If something breaks, the customer wants to be able to recoup some of those damages. Or think of a manufacturer who makes a child's toy, and that child's toy fails and then hurts that child. So CGL is a very important part of any business policy. On your test, there's probably going to be around 20 test questions. The first part is probably the most difficult, but then the rest of the chapter you'll kind of have heard in other portions of your learning. So we'll go ahead and get started. When you first write a commercial liability policy, you have to choose when the coverage is triggered. There's two types of forms for commercial general liability. There's a per occurrence form and a claims made form. These forms determine whether or not the business only has coverage today while it has insurance, or if that business is covered for the rest of its life, even if they're out of business. So when we write a commercial general liability policy, we almost always write it on a per occurrence basis. Per occurrence means that the business is going to be covered for forever, for anything that arises from that product that was made, and they are going to be covered as long as that insurance company is still in business. The actual product manufacturer doesn't have to be in business for per occurrence to still pay out 30 years later. Claims made is very rarely written. We typically only write claims made insurance if it's for professional liability, which is like medical malpractice or errors and omissions insurance for insurance agents, or like CPA, public accountant liability. We'll talk about claims made and professional liability a little bit later, but let's talk about per occurrence right now. So when you insure a business, you're going to write them as per occurrence liability. So for example, a construction worker has insurance in 2005 and they built a house. In 2015, the house burns down because of an electrical issue that the business, the construction worker did incorrectly. Even if the contractor's out of business, canceled their policy, the per occurrence form will cover that business forever. So the primary difference between per occurrence and claims made is something known as coverage triggers. And coverage triggers means when the coverage is triggered. Per occurrence, it's triggered the day the contractor built the house. Whereas claims made, coverage is only triggered if you have insurance when you make the claim. If we had written that contractor as claims made, they would not be covered in 2015 because they would have had their policy canceled or they would have been out of business by then. So claims made insurance only covers you if you have insurance when the claim was made. Per occurrence covers you for forever. Per occurrence, the coverage is triggered when you actually built the product. Claims made, the coverage is triggered if you still have insurance and the claim is made during that time. Again, as an insurance agent, almost every liability policy you write will be per occurrence. We want to make sure that our customers are covered forever for any work that they do. Per occurrence is more expensive than claims made, but that's just common that we write almost everything as per occurrence. Now, claims made will have a few more test questions than the per occurrence policy will, because claims made has more aspects to it. When you write something as claims made, the policy begins on something called the retroactive date. The retroactive date is the date that the coverage was started or the date that the coverage was backdated to. For example, since claims made is primarily for professional liability, let's say a doctor began treating patients in 2002. Then the doctor tries to change insurance companies in 2006. The new insurance company will make the retroactive date back to 2002. So the doctor is covered for any of the prior acts on the new insurance policy. The downside of claims made is that if you ever have a lapse in coverage, so if you go, say, 6 months without having a policy, the new insurance companies won't backdate. So you want to make sure that if you ever sell somebody professional liability, you always go with the retroactive date back to when they began actually doing the business, because claims made insurance, you have to have insurance when the claim was made, and you also had to have done the work while you had that insurance. So the retroactive date is the day the policy begins. If you're switching somebody insurance, you can backdate the new policy to an older retroactive date, but make sure that the customer never has a lapse in coverage, or else the insurance company might not backdate it. Now, if the customer that you have is not sure whether or not they're going to be in business for the next year, so they might not want to renew their policy. Remember that lapse, which means new companies might not backdate? If the customer's not sure and they want to avoid a lapse, at the end of the year, they can do something called a mini tail. A mini tail will give the business owner an extra 60 days of coverage. So if they want to figure out whether or not they're still going to be in business next year, or they want extra time to shop around for a new insurance company, the mini tail will give that claims made policy an extra 60 days of coverage. Now let's say the business owner is thinking about not being in business at all, and they want to cancel their policy. So like say a doctor is retiring. Their claims made policy, since you have to have insurance when the claim was made, allows you to add something called a midi tail. A midi tail is for coverage longer than the 60 days. So what you can do is, let's say the doctor had insurance from 2002 to 2012 and they want to retire. You gave them, say, a mini tail to give them 60 days to decide. And then the doctor says, well, I think I am going to retire, so I'm not going to buy a new policy. You'll add a midi tail to give them longer coverage for all of those past acts that they did. The midi tail is a way of still having coverage even though you're not in business. It can be 1 year's extra coverage, 10 years extra coverage. It's something known as an extended reporting period, which gives the business owner extra time of coverage, and they can report claims even though the policy is lapsed, because they had to pay extra for these midi tails and extended reporting period. It's typically 2 years of premium. So when I sold my insurance agency, what I did is I paid 2 years worth of premiums and I was covered for the rest of my life. It switched my claims made policy to a per occurrence, and now I have coverage for any act that I did while I was in the insurance industry selling insurance. So claims made will likely be on your test. The beginning date of a claims made policy is the retroactive date. That's the date that it was backdated to. If the customer is unsure whether or not they want to continue coverage next year, you can add a mini tail. A mini tail gives them extra coverage for only 60 days, gives them some time to think. If they decide that they don't want to be in business anymore, then you'll add an extended reporting period, which is a midi tail, which will give that owner extra liability coverage for longer than 60 days. Could be 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. Typically, it's either 5 years or for life. The extended reporting periods, which are the midi tails, usually cost around 2 times the annual premium to get coverage for a much longer time. So, per occurrence will cover the customer for the rest of their life. Claims made will only cover them if they have insurance when the claim was made. And the claims made policies can be backdated, and you can give them coverage past the policy ending, but they will have to pay extra for that. Commercial general liability also has limitations on how much they'll cover. The standard commercial general liability policy is written with an aggregate 1 million, 2 million. What that means is it's $1 million per claim, $2 million aggregate for the year. You can only have a maximum of $1 million per lawsuit, per claim, per injury to a person. And it will deplete the aggregate each claim that you have. So for example, let's say that the business has somebody slip and fall on a wet floor, and they have a 1 million, 2 million policy. The claim ends up being $250,000. That's under the 1 million, so that's paid out. But now for the rest of the year, they have 1 million, 1,750,000. The aggregate is depleted. So it's kind of like a reserve limit for the entire year. It's $1 million per each incident, per each claim, $2 million safety reserves for the year. At the end of the year, the aggregate will reinstate, but it will not reinstate after each claim. So you'll keep depleting this aggregate throughout the year. So let's say you have another claim of $300,000. That's definitely under the $1 million limit. So then your aggregate got depleted another $300,000. Now let's say you have $1 million claim. That million was covered, but now you only have $475,000 because you deplete the aggregate with each claim, and that's the $2 million reserves that you had. So aggregates are a cash reserves that keep getting depleted for each claim. This is the standard policy. You can purchase higher limits, like 2 million, 2 million, 5 million, 5 million. But if you want to get into the, say, $5, $10, $20 million policies, you're typically better off adding an umbrella over top of this. Fire legal is also covered underneath a commercial general liability policy. This is also known as damage to premises rented to you. So let's say that you have a office that you rent, and your printer catches on fire. You damage the office building that you've rented, the office space that you've rented. That's what fire legal protects you from. It's damage to premises rented to you, which is typically the minimum of $50,000. You can get higher fire legal, but fire legal protects the business owner for any space that they rent, and if they damage those rented spaces. Commercial general liability also has medical payments to others with the minimum limit of $5,000. If you remember from homeowners and auto, the minimum limit was $1,000, but in commercial policies, the commercial general liability gets up to $5,000 per person. And if you remember, medical payments pays out per person regardless of fault, meaning that it doesn't have to be the business's fault for a customer to claim under medical payments. And the customer will have 3 years to receive their medical payments coverage, and the customer must also submit to a medical exam. Commercial general liability has limitations on coverage. The primary one that you'll see on the test is the aggregate. The aggregate is the cash reserves for the year that does not reinstate after each claim. The aggregate only reinstates at the end of the year. Each claim that you have depletes that aggregate. Fire legal should not be a big deal on the test. It's also known as damage to property premises rented to you. Medical payments will be on the test, but you'll primarily see that on a homeowner's or auto policy. But we wanted to bring that up again for you. It does have a higher limit than the homeowners and auto, which was $1,000. It's up to $5,000 in business policies. Now, before we move on, I would like to try out just one more aggregate example. Let's say we have a $1 million, $2 million limit, and you have a claim of $1,250,000. Your policy will only pay out that million. Then for the rest of the year, you'll have 1 million, 1 million. Because the million was paid out from the first claim, which depleted the aggregate limit. Now, you might be wondering what happened to the extra $250,000. That business would have to come out of pocket to cover that extra amount left over, or if they had an umbrella over top of it, that would cover the extra $250,000. We'll just try one more. Let's say we have the $1 million, $2 million limit, and you have a claim of $750,000. That would totally be paid, but for the rest of the year, you would have $1,250,000 as your remaining limits, because the 750 came out of the aggregate, so you used to have at least $1 million left over. You may or may not see a similar question like that on your test. So first we talked about when the coverage was triggered. Is the coverage triggered for life, or is it only triggered when you have coverage? Then we talked about the limits that the policy has. Now let's talk about what the policy covers. The primary portion of commercial general liability is known as bodily injury and property damage, and then it's broken down into subsections of premises and operations and products and completed operations. Typically, a business owner will have all of these coverages, but they can choose not to purchase certain ones if there's no reason for them to have it. But usually, the business will purchase all of these coverages. Premises and operations coverage protects a business if a person gets hurt on their property. It doesn't really matter what hurt the customer, just somebody has to be injured on site for premises and operations. This does not cover employees. Employees are covered under workers' compensation. So premises and operations is coverage on the location of the business for bodily injury, or the business damages property on location. Products and completed operations protects the business if they injure somebody off-site or off-location. This is for manufacturers, for example. A manufacturer makes a product, delivers it to the person's home. The person was injured by that product, maybe ate some cereal or soup that damaged their insides. Since the person got injured at home, not at the manufacturing warehouse, the products coverage protects them. Now let's say that you go to a brewery or a winery where you go to their location and you drink wine or you drink beer. You get sick while you're drinking the wine at the winery, that's still premises and operations because you got injured on the location of the business. But let's say you buy some beer, buy some wine, you take it home, then you drink it and get sick, that's products and completed operations. Products and completed operations can also be separated. Products coverage is primarily for manufacturers. Completed operations is for people who assemble products, such as like a contractor who installs a whiteboard, for example, or a contractor who installs plumbing. If the plumbing bursts while the contractor is still on location, that's premises and operations. But if the contractor has finished all of the work and then left and gone to another job, and then the pipe bursts, that's completed operations. So, for example, let's say that you are a bicycle repair shop, and a customer brings a bike in, and you fix one of the wheels. They take it out into the parking lot, and then the wheel falls off, and the customer is hurt. That's still premises and operations because they're in your parking lot. This is typically up to 100 feet within range of the business. Now let's say they take the same bike home and the handlebars fall off. That's going to be a completed operations claim because the bicycle shop didn't actually make a product, they just assembled a product, they put it together. So that's a completed operations claim. Let's say that the person takes it home and then the steel tubing breaks while they're at home. That'd be a product claim underneath the manufacturer of the bike. So premises and operations is coverage if somebody gets hurt on location. Products and completed operations is coverage if somebody gets hurt off your location. Products is for manufacturers. Completed operations is for contractors who install stuff, or say Jiffy Lube who installs oil filters, or a bicycle repair shop. Now, which one of these do you think that a supermarket would most likely need? Supermarkets most likely need premises and operations because they're more worried about slip and fall, people getting hurt on their site. The supermarket typically doesn't make any products, and they don't really assemble many products. In reality, they'd get all of the coverage, but supermarkets primarily need premises and operations. Which one do you think a hotel most likely needs? Premises and operations, people getting hurt on their location. Products and completed operations covers them if they get injured at home. Now the cool thing is that your location follows you with liability insurance. So like when the contractor goes onto a job, that's now the contractor's location. Let's say a contractor is re-asphalting a parking lot. If somebody comes onto the parking lot and gets hurt while the contractor is working, that's going to be the contractor's premises and operations coverage. But let's say that the contractor finishes the job, then the asphalt buckles up and fails. Then the business owner can fall underneath the completed operations portion of the contractor's work, their liability. So premises and operations will follow you from job to job to job to job. So wherever you're at that time, you are covered underneath your premises and operations. You need products and completed for once you finish the job. Personal injury coverage typically goes hand in hand with advertising liability. So we call this personal injury and advertising, sometimes known as personal advertising and injury. Personal injury coverage is if the business harms somebody's reputation. If you hurt somebody's body, that falls under bodily injury and property damage. Personal injury is all up here. It's mental anguish. So if you defame a person or you defame a business and they sue you, that falls under personal injury coverage. If you commit invasion of privacy, such as let's say that you own a rental home and you come in unannounced and the person just stepped out of the shower, they might have nightmares over that. Personal injury protects the business because you harmed that person mentally. Let's say that you have a mailman arrested because you think that they are trying to burglarize your house or your neighbor's house, but then it's found out that it was just a mailman. Now everybody thinks the mailman is a criminal, even though they were found not guilty, didn't do anything wrong. They can sue you for that reputation damage. So personal injury protects a business from wrongful eviction, wrongful termination, wrongful arrest, protects the business from defamation, slander, invasion of privacy. This is kind of the big lawsuits because it's hard to put a number on how much your reputation was damaged. So personal injury protects you if you injure somebody's reputation. Advertising coverage is pretty much the same thing. It's if you injure another business through your advertisement by using such as copyright infringement, or if you say that you're the only safe company in town. If you say you're the only safe company in town, that implies that all the other businesses are not safe. So advertising is if you injure another business's reputation through an advertisement that you put out. So bodily injury and property damage is broken down into on location and off location. That's premises and operations, products and completed operations. That's if you hurt somebody physically or you hurt their property. Personal injury and advertising is if you injure them mentally, if you injure their reputation. If you have somebody falsely arrested that is later found not guilty, they can sue you, but you're covered under personal injury and advertising. Then, as we learned earlier, commercial general liability also has medical payments coverage. Medical payments was $5,000 to other people injured by you. Medical payments, again, is written as no-fault coverage, and they have 3 years to claim, and it pays out per person. And then fire legal was damage to premises rented to you. So let's run through a few scenarios just to make sure that you understand everything. Which one do you think that Walmart most likely needs? And that would be premises and operations, people getting injured on their location. Which one do you think Johnson & Johnson, who makes like soap and baby powder products, needs? Products. And then a contractor or an installer most likely needs completed operations. Which one do you think will protect you if you have a business that says that they are the best company and that their competitors are no good? That's advertising. And then which one do you think protects the business if they have somebody wrongfully arrested? That would be personal injury. Now let's say 2 customers are in a store. One customer picks up a box and drops it on another customer's foot. Which one do you think of the business insurance policy will protect the business? So again, it's 2 customers. One customer dropped a box on another customer's foot. It's not going to be this because the business isn't liable for that. The 2 customers dropped the boxes on their own feet, so it's not going to be premises and operations or products and completed operations. That's going to fall under medical payments to others. Medical payments to others, again, is no fault coverage. So even if the business isn't at fault, medical payments still pays out. And medical payments is covered, it's low limits, to help try and stave off the $1 million lawsuits. The business would essentially file this claim and say, look, we know it's not our fault, but you got injured at our location. It's the other customer's fault, but here's $5,000 for your medical bills. Please don't sue us for the $1 million that these have. So medical payments is a no-fault coverage, usually trying to lower lawsuits. And then again, fire legal protects you if you damage the premises that you rented. So if you damage the office building that you rented. These policies also do have exclusions. For example, liability insurance will cover the business if they acquire a new location within 30 days. But then they'd have to add that new location onto the policy. So like if a supermarket buys the supermarket right next door, they'll get automatic coverage for 30 days. That gives you time to add the policy, the new supermarket to the policy, but there's no coverage past those 30 days of the newly acquired property. Some other exclusions are intentional acts or dishonest acts. If you do something on purpose, you are not covered. So if you intentionally make a product that fails and then a customer's hurt, you're not covered. If you lie and steal from somebody, you're not covered. Liquor liability is also excluded under regular commercial liability policies. Liquor liability has its own coverage called liquor liability. However, let's say you have a small insurance agency and you have a Christmas party. And somebody comes to your Christmas party, they drink too much, then drive and get in a car accident. They could sue the business, your agency, for having the alcohol at the Christmas party. That is covered underneath the regular commercial liability policy, because if you do small liquor exposures, such as Christmas parties and things like that, also known as incidental operations, your liability will protect you. But if you're engaged in the activity of doing liquor, like that's your primary business, like a restaurant or a brewery, then you're not going to get coverage. So liquor liability is excluded unless it's an incidental operation, which is traditionally in the real world defined as 5% or less of your operations. Pollution is also excluded. Pollution coverage has its own coverage. Product recalls are also excluded. If you had to do a recall, that's going to be a very, very big claim, and you've admitted fault. The insurance companies will not cover product recalls because you've admitted that you did something wrong, and the insurance company did not have a chance to defend you. So they will cover incidental liquor. They will cover newly acquired property for 30 days, but there are some other exclusions, such as intentional acts, pollution, and product recalls. Now, something that's really neat that is covered, but you might think was excluded, is contractual obligations or deceptive advertising as well. Contractual obligations are covered underneath your liability policy. So if you fail to perform a contract and you get sued, you can be covered underneath your personal injury and advertising coverage. Or if you deceptively advertise, such as saying you're going to do something, then you don't do it, that's still covered as long as you didn't go out with the full intention of doing like fraud. So there's a fine line of things that are covered and not covered underneath the intentional acts provision. If it's straight up dishonest and straight up on purpose, that's intentional and not covered. But if it's deceptive or like a contractual obligation not fulfilled, we don't consider that as intentional. It's just kind of like you started off thinking you were going to do it right, but then something went wrong and ended up not fulfilling that obligation. So contractual is covered, deceptive is covered, but intentional is not covered. When you take the practice test, you'll see what I mean. The questions are typically, which of the following is covered underneath the commercial general liability policy? Intentional acts, no. Pollution, no. Product recalls, no. Contractual obligation, yes. So contractual is covered. Commercial policies also have conditions, just like every other policy. The first condition is that you have 30 days to notify the insurance company when you have a claim, and then you do have to cooperate with that insurance company and give them access to all of your records, because the insurance company gets to decide whether or not to defend or fight, and you cannot make any decisions before that. So you have to give them as much information as possible for them to make their decision whether or not to defend you or pay out a little bit later on. If your insurance company ever denies your claim, you only have 2 years to bring legal action against the insurance company. So you don't have a long time to sue the insurance company if you're not happy with what they decide. If they decided to deny your claim and not defend you, you would have to bring a lawsuit within 2 years against your insurance company. If the insurance company ends up paying a claim, then we find out later that that claim was not true. Then you have to allow the insurance company to seek recovery under subrogation. So they'll have plenty of time to sue the at-fault party if the insurance company ever does pay out a claim and it's not your fault. So you have to allow the insurance company to subrogate on your behalf. As an agent, every policy that you sell commercial liability as, you'll create the customer a proposal. Proposals are similar to quotes that the customer can sign that day and coverage can begin. When you sell commercial insurance, you want to make sure that everybody's on the same page before you give them the proposal, because the proposal actually does start the policy. So typically you'll give the customer the quote over the phone or the quote in person, and then when you're ready to actually bind coverage and begin its effective, you'll create them a proposal. Proposals are good for 60 days. That means you can drop off the proposal and then they can sign it 2 weeks from now and actually affect their coverage. It's similar to a binder, except they're not covered during the proposal until they sign it. Once they sign it and then give you money, they will be covered under the proposal. It then turns into a policy. In commercial insurance, typically the customers have to put down a deposit. Not on the test, but usually deposits are at a minimum 25% in commercial insurance. The deposits that they put down, they would never get back. It's something known as earned premium. So for example, let's say your proposal was $10,000 a year, and the customer had to put down a deposit of $2,500, 25%, to get the policy put into effect. So the customer signs the proposal, gives you $2,500. That is known as earned premium, meaning that if the customer ever cancels their policy, let's say they buy it today, cancel tomorrow, they never get their money back. Earned premium is the premium the insurance company is entitled to. So commercial customers typically only change insurance once a year because they have to put up a deposit in order to start the policy. Those deposits are just the first payment. When you write commercial liability, the premium is based off of the company's gross sales. But what you have to do is try to project in the future how well this business is going to do. So let's say your your proposal was based off of $10,000 premium, and that was based off of $3 million in gross sales. Later on in the year, the company's already surpassed $3 million in gross sales. They're up to $5 million. Their premium will go up. The customers have to allow the insurance company to do a premium audit, which means that typically once a year, the insurance company will send a request to the customer, how much are your current gross sales? And the customers have to open up their books to the insurance company, and then their premiums will get adjusted based off their accurate gross sales. So your proposal is the document you give to the customer. They have 60 days to sign it and start their policy. Then they'll put up a deposit, which is earned premium. They don't get refunded the deposit. Then the insurance company is allowed to audit that premium and change the premiums throughout the year. The insurance companies can even go up to 3 years later and back charge the customer, but typically they're done in 1 year, so they have a maximum of 3 years to audit the customer. The insurance company does not have to audit the customer, but they have the right to audit the customers. As an agent, what you should do is contact your customers every quarter, so every 3 months, and figure out if they're on track to hit their current gross sales. But if they have more, then the insurance company might audit them. And then the insurance company does have 3 years later to audit them and hit them with a back charge. So you definitely want to make sure that you don't underestimate gross sales to get a lower upfront premium, because the customer will get hit typically with a back charge for that premium. So your first document was the proposal, then the customer made the deposit, then the insurance company can verify all of that and do a premium audit on that policy that was just written. The insurance company then has the right to decide whether or not they want to pay a claim or deny a claim. You must cooperate with the insurance company. If they ever deny your claim, you have 2 years to bring legal action. And then you also have to allow the insurance company to subrogate, to sue on your behalf to get any money back from somebody else. Just like homeowners and auto, all liability policies include supplementary payments. Supplementary payments are the costs that the business owner incurs in order to defend a lawsuit that the insurance company is fighting. The insurance company will cover all defense costs for the customer, because the insurance company is the one who decides which attorneys to use. The insurance companies will also give you a reasonable expense to go to court. So if they decide to fight the claim and you have to testify, they'll pay you $250 a day to come to court. If you lose and the insurance company appeals, the insurance company will cover the interest on the appeal while you're waiting for it to go through the court system. Supplementary payments are pretty much legal costs for the insurance company defending you. These are always in addition to the limits you bought. So for example, if your policy was a $1 million, $2 million policy, and you had a claim of $1 million, and then the attorneys cost $200,000, even though you've hit your per occurrence limit, the attorney is covered for free because it's a supplementary payment. Supplementary payments are always covered in addition to the coverage afforded in the policy. Because remember, the insurance company is the one who decides whether or not they want to fight the claim or whether or not they want to deny the claim. Now, commercial policies will cover a lot of people. Commercial policies cover the business. It will cover all of the owners of the business, all the managers of the business. So if the owners get sued because of the business, or let's say a middle manager gets sued because they did something wrong, that's covered. If you're a sole proprietorship, meaning that you have not got incorporated, your spouse is even covered underneath your liability policy, because a lot of sole proprietorships are run by husband and wife. So your spouse is covered as well underneath your liability policy. If you're an incorporated business, your stockholders are covered too, because they own the business. So it'll definitely cover pretty much anybody involved in the business. But if you remember, an employee who got injured on the job, that falls under workers' comp. But if the employee injures a customer, that falls under commercial general liability. Employees are covered, but it doesn't actually pay the employee. Liability always pays third-party people who get injured. So let's say that I buy a child's toy and it injures my child. I'm going to sue everybody involved in the business. I'm going to sue the owners. I'm going to sue the business. I'm going to sue the stockholders. I'm going to sue the worker who made the toy. I'm going to sue the quality control inspector. Everybody's covered underneath commercial general liability. And you're covered for that product worldwide. So like if that toy was sold to me from a Chinese company, I can sue them and their policy still covers. However, premises and operations and the other insurance policies only cover you while you're located in the United States. So these policies will cover everybody. Your test might have a question. It could say, which of the following is not considered an insured underneath a commercial general liability policy? Owners, yes. Stockholders, yes, because remember, they own the company. Employees, yes. Spouse of an employee, no. The spouse of an employee has nothing to do with the business. I'm not even sure why the spouse was on location or doing work, but your test might have a weird question, and spouses of employees are not covered unless it's a sole proprietorship. But if it's a sole proprietorship, you would have been the owner. So it would have covered the owner's spouse, but not the spouse of an employee. So different people are covered underneath the policy, depending on the makeup of the company. The attorney for the business is also covered too, for any acts that the business does. So remember, liability pays claims to third-party people, and liability protects you from lawsuits. If anybody engaged in your business harms somebody, then your liability will kick in, protect that business. But on your test, a spouse of an employee would not be covered unless it was a sole proprietorship. Now, the last type of liability insurance is known as professional liability. If you remember from the beginning of this chapter, professional liability is almost always written as claims made. Meaning that you're only covered if you have insurance when the claim is made. This is the reason why doctors never let their malpractice insurance lapse. Professional liability protects professionals who primarily do work or speak directly with customers or perform those operations on the customers. Medical malpractice protects doctors and nurses. In the state of Texas, doctors and nurses typically purchase malpractice through the Texas Medical Liability Underwriting Association. It'll sell those doctors and nurses medical malpractice insurance, as well as regular old premises and operations liability. So if somebody slips and falls on the doctor's office, this kicks in. If the doctor makes a mistake and leaves something in the customer during a surgery, malpractice insurance kicks in. As an insurance agent, we will buy something called E&O, also known as errors and omissions insurance. E&O protects us if we say something wrong to the customer. It protects us if we forget to do our job. Let's say a customer gives you a cash payment and you forgot, not on purpose, you forgot to submit it to the insurance company. Then they get in a car accident. They don't have insurance. So they'll sue you, and your E&O, your errors and omissions insurance, protects you. Let's say you tell a customer that their policy covers everything. Well, then they have a claim for liquor liability. Let's say they start a liquor store. They're going to sue you because you told them they were covered for everything, but remember, liquor and pollution were excluded. So E&O, errors and omissions insurance, protects us from negligent acts when we make mistakes. It will not protect us if we're dishonest, though. So make sure you don't steal from customers, because you will not be covered for that. It does not cover intentional acts either, but it will cover mistakes, or if you say something wrong to a customer about their coverage. Employment practices liability, also known as EPL, protects business owners if they sexually harass an employee, wrongfully terminate an employee, sexual discrimination against an employee. EPL, employment practices liability, is a portion of professional liability that protects the business if they make a mistake with their employees. Employment practices liability is relatively inexpensive to buy, and it's very, very good coverage because these claims are always he said, she said, he said, he said. It's words. It's kind of a battle of words, and EPL will protect you if somebody charges you with sexual harassment or workplace discrimination. This is during the hiring process and also during the regular working process. Since professional liability covers reputation coverage, so like if a doctor has a malpractice claim, nobody wants to go to that doctor anymore. If you make a mistake as a lawyer or insurance agent, nobody wants to buy from you anymore. If you sexually discriminate against an employee, nobody wants to work for you anymore. Since these cover your reputation, you might want to fight to the end. You might not want to pay anybody, because you know if you lose that lawsuit, that it's going to really damage your business owner's reputation. These policies have something called the consent to settle provision, which means that the insurance company must get the customer, the insurance agent, the doctor, the customer's consent before they actually settle a claim. Meaning that if you're a doctor and you have medical malpractice and somebody says that you left something inside of them, but it wasn't you, you know it wasn't you. The insurance company might want to just pay the 10 grand to make it go away, but you'll say, no, I have to consent before you can settle a claim. So you're going to fight it to the end, you're going to win that lawsuit, and now your reputation remains intact. So professional liability has the consent to settle provision, where the insurance company must have the customer's consent, the insured's consent, before they actually make payment. Professional liability, if you sell this, make sure you tell the customer that it's claims made insurance. They never want to have a lapse. If they ever let this lapse, they will not likely get a retroactive date. Anyway, the commercial general liability policy is relatively simple. It covers a lot. When you sell CGL to people, you can usually feel comfortable that the customer is covered for most scenarios. You can sell it as a monoline by itself, or you can sell as part of a package. But almost every business will have commercial general liability. For your test purposes, a lot of it's going to be scenarios where, say, a contractor installs something, or a manufacturer delivers a product, or somebody hires a contractor, or somebody slips and falls on a premises. So you're going to see a lot of the premises and operations, products and completed operations. You'll see some personal injury claims as well. So definitely make sure you pay attention to that. Medical payments, as always, is important in every chapter. Then you might have one question on aggregate, such as so-and-so had a claim, how much is left over. Then supplementary payments are usually covered underneath this chapter as well, meaning that defense costs are always in addition to the limit. But this chapter is not very difficult. As long as you understood the primary differences between premises and operations, products and completed operations, and personal injury and advertising, you should be pretty safe on this chapter.